along the lines of, are you giving up your privacy unknowingly? And do you understand how that information will be used, could be used in the future?
So, Travis, today we're going to talk about TikTok.
Ah, good old
Which
TikTok.
normally would be funny, but if you've been watching the news at all, then you can understand why we're going to have this conversation. But specifically, um, this conversation, we're not going political. We're not, diving into any of that stuff. But because a lot of businesses use platforms like TikTok, other social media, and other uh, I'll put it this way: data processing centers. We'll say it like that. For advertising purposes, this may be something that business owners are paying close attention to or are wondering about. So, Travis, why don't we start off by talking about what's going on with
Sure.
TikTok and kind of why we're concentrating on this
Yeah,
right now?
there's a possible ban coming out, right? And I know the general concern is that, who has access to the data, and does it, is it going to be in the hands of the Chinese government, and then the United States government's worried about what will happen with that information, how it could be used to influence the population that uses the app. So that's the gist, right? That's like the main concern. And, so people are wondering, like, is it dangerous to use this app? It's technology. It's something that, question we may get asked, um, because it's loosely in our realm. And I think it's a good thing for people to ask those kinds of questions about TikTok and other apps, and what kind of software they should be concerned about. But that's the gist, right? Is that there's a chance it may no longer be something you can access or use as in America.
So, why do you think that this is? And you kind of mentioned it just now, but why do you think that this is something that is not that people shouldn't just focus on TikTok specifically
Yeah.
about?
No, yeah. The reason, so I understand that there's a unique concern with that app, in that there are, you know, other nations involved that on a political level people are concerned about, right? Or on a politically competitive level are concerned about. But really, I think that what's more important for people to understand in general, which is the same about this applies to TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn, Google, YouTube. I mean, on and on and on and on and on. Is that these services that, for the most part, are free, make their money collecting data on you and then selling it to advertisers. Um, and so I think it's just important to understand that there could be additional security concerns with one platform or another. That is a thing. Um, but generally, you should go into social media with your eyes open, and just know that when you're using a service like this, especially when it's free, you're the product. The service isn't the product, and that's why it's free. And so, couple things that might be a concern for some people. LinkedIn's a good example. There's a tremendous amount of data that can be dug up on you from your LinkedIn profile that could be used to target you for social engineering, for a phishing attack or a spear phishing attack, or to even attack somebody else in your organization pre- by pretending they're you, because they have enough information to sort of come across as being convincing, right? That they're you. One example is if you wanted to do a spear phishing attack for like the chief operating officer of a large company, and he has a LinkedIn, it's probably not difficult to guess his email, right? It's likely going to be his first name dot last name, first initial dot last name. It's some sort of combination of those things. More often than it isn't, that's what it's going to be. And so if you find out, oh, this guy's the COO and here's his name, now I can start guessing his email. That's a real thing that can happen. Now, I'm not saying don't use LinkedIn. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it. But again, the idea of, if you're going to use these things, you should have an idea of what is out there. You should have an idea of what you're comfortable with putting out there. And you should make this decision consciously. That's kind of my point.
So back in the day when it used to be like, oh, hey, I don't want to put my information online because someone might find my address or something like that. Where people used to cut up their mail because someone might associate their name to their address, those type of things. Now um, I have some other friends who are in similar fields, and we talk about it, and we all have those, those paranoias. But at this point in time, it's kind of almost like, well, it's already out there. If you're using any of these platforms, if you're using the internet, we could probably just say that if you're using the
Yeah.
internet, then your information is probably out there. If you go to the doctor, if you have visited a hospital or a clinic, where are they storing their information? How do they collect information and share it with other specialists maybe that you need to visit? So your information is out there in all these different spheres. Um, that's one thing we kind of got to get past that. Just being work concerned if someone's going to find out what our name is or something. That's there.
We're definitely beyond, yeah, that something that basic, right? Finding out, well, if they know you at all, there, Fast People Search is a website that you can use to look up a lot
Hmm.
of information, reverse address lookup kind of stuff, where you say, I got the address, who lives here. That's all free. That's out there. And it's not that everybody's data is out there, because there are people who have never been on social media. There are people who have been pretty much unplugged from day one, but there's fewer
Yeah.
and fewer, and it's less and less practical. One of the big problems that we know about is browsers often require logins, right? And who runs the
Hmm.
browsers? Where does that data
Yeah.
go? It's going to Microsoft. It's going to Google, right? It's going to Apple. So you may not even be on social media in the traditional sense, but you're still tied into the companies that run social media, and they're still collecting a lot of information on you. And the concern is not generally, I want to say this because I think there's a lot of people who are like, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. I have nothing to hide. That's fine. Good. But the concern is more along the lines of, are you giving up your privacy unknowingly? And do you understand how that information will be used or could be used in the future? And the answer is, to the second one, we none of us really know how that information can be used in the future, because we don't know what laws are going to happen later. We don't know who's going to be in charge of different governments or different corporations. We don't know what those people are going to do, but they will have the data, and they'll have a lot of options of what to do with it later on. So it's, for me, it's important to just, again, like I said, you need to understand that you're essentially generating a dossier on yourself when you do this. That dossier is useful. Right now, the majority of the use of that information is for marketing. Again, we benefit from data like that, right? If we want to target a particular demographic, and say these are the people we want to display our ads to, because we think that the services that we offer are ideal for these people. So we benefit from that data. It's mostly anonymized, but it's at some point it's not anonymized. Um, but I think the couple things I'd like to point out: if you're somebody who deals with very sensitive information, particularly stuff that has to do, with people's livelihood, like life, if you're like a defense contractor, or you're like you're somebody in law enforcement or whatnot, a lot of times there's already policies and stuff that are handed down through those organizations and institutions that tell you how to handle this. So you're usually already covered. But I think it's just important to understand, who am I? What do I do for a living? What kind of risk am I putting out there by using these platforms? And what kind of risk do I want to have? So I think that's something to consider. The other thing is, if you manage a lot of wealth, a lot of money, if you're susceptible to things like being taken hostage, uh, ransomed, like literally ransomed, not just like ransomware ransomed. Uh, think about what you're putting out there. Think about what your family's putting out there. The other thing I want to say: if you're not those people, you're just a regular person, and you got kids and stuff, there's a lot of weirdos out there, and they're looking at this data, and they're trying to find out who your kids are. So you should, pay attention to how your children and your family uses these platforms. There's a potential for a very large discussion here. I know we're just kind of using TikTok as a way to get into this, but really to me, the bigger conversation is about all social media, all data sharing and data privacy, and putting some work and effort into trying to contain that information reasonably. You're not going to contain all of it if you use it at all. Um, One of the things you should look into doing is, like, I think you're familiar with this, I'm sure, about how you can have like sort of different groups that are allowed to see different things that you do in your life or in your posts. I would highly recommend you manage those types of permissions really, really well. And you don't just allow a bunch of strangers to be friends with you on these platforms, but you only link up with people you know, have a reason. If these people aren't part of your core circle, make sure you've created a different group for those folks, and don't share everything. Like, does the guy you met one time at a conference need to see your vacation videos or vacation pictures? I don't. I would say no. I'd say that person doesn't need that information. So I would just say use there are some tools built into these platforms to set your permissions. There's plenty of resources if you go to YouTube and look up how to do this, or just go to the web and look it up. But really, sure, TikTok might get banned. There might be a concern that, you know, the Chinese government is going to use this information. But I think it's important to know that all of these platforms have this kind of data, and they sell it to other countries. So you're
Yeah.
not just safe because you're off one platform. It's all out there if you're worried about it.
Yeah. So jumping back into, talking about TikTok specifically, because that's what's happening in the news. A lot of people are concerned with that. Um, is there anything specifically about TikTok itself that you think, um, again, we're not driving any political angles or anything here, but like that you think it should be isolated, um, that businesses or individuals might want to be aware of with TikTok apart from these other ones, or would you kind of lump it all together? What do you say on that, Travis?
Yes, I would lump it all together and say that whatever you do, or whatever you would set up as your security or best practices for TikTok, would apply to all the platforms. It's just what's good for the goose is good for the gander, in my opinion. And this could change. I want to say that it could change. Information could come out later where it looks different. But from what I've seen so far, and for those business owners out there who are considering using TikTok for advertising, I'd say go ahead and use it while it's here, if you want to, but use it wisely, right? And be cognizant of what you're putting in there. But I do think it's a very useful platform right now because it's where the eyeballs are. And social media is kind of, you got to go where the people are for it to be effective. And I'd say TikTok is probably the most effective with at least a younger generation, but that generation's the demographics growing considerably. Like, I know people who are 60 years old who are using TikTok regularly. So it's not just, kids, it's adults that use it quite a bit. And they have landed on something quite useful, uh, you know, if you set it up correctly. And I want to say that too. There's so much to say here about just the way that just the natural dangers of the platforms, not the stuff behind the platforms, but the way they work with, like, feeding you serotonin constantly, but also the fact that they can give you information that you weren't necessarily looking for, that may not be the kind of information you want to receive. And there's an appropriate way to early on train those algorithms out of that. I'll say this briefly. If you're going to, I'm not saying you should use TikTok, but if you are going to use it, the first thing you should do after you make an account is immediately search for content you want and train it right out of the gates. Because otherwise, it's going to start just handing you everything. You might be handing content you don't want. So, go in. I told a friend of mine this the other day. I said, go in. Here's what you search for. Search for cooking, like how to make, healthy salads, uh, you know, animal videos, and, something about the industry you're in. And put that in there and get the algorithm started off in the path you want it. Because otherwise, it's going to start offering you things. And what's crazy is it's going to measure your responses to those things. And it's going to know when you paused on that video and looked at it for a while and then left it. But it's going to know, like, oh, you didn't like it, you didn't comment, but
But you
you
liked it.
did You did like it. You spent a minute there. And so I'm going to keep feeding you those because I think that's what you want. And it's going to be able to read that based on the algorithm and the timing and what you do and how you respond. And it's social media, it's the internet, it's got everything on it, and it's the Wild West. So if you don't tell it, if you don't control it immediately and tell it what you want, it will tell you what it's going to give you. And that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing for a lot of people.
But yeah, just to kind of wrap it up, because we're actually going to do a part two on this, and maybe we'll get into some of the things that you can do. Obviously, everybody has different ideas and different ways of raising their kids or making decisions for themselves. But just a couple things you can keep in mind as individuals, as business owners, maybe even some things from a marketing perspective, because all of these tools are, as was mentioned by Travis, are geared deeply into marketing. And there's some things that a lot of people maybe don't know about how some of this stuff works. We can get into a little more detail on that on part two of this video. But just to kind of summarize things, wrap things up, Travis, TikTok's been in the news. A lot of people are worried and concerned about TikTok specifically. 30 seconds or less, just give us a little summary about how what's going on in the news with TikTok affects businesses and maybe a couple things they can keep in mind.
Sure. So they might get banned. So if you're on the platform now, a lot of that work that you put in might go away. With regards to the security concerns, the security concerns are real, but they're the same as any. They're at least the same as any other app like Facebook, Twitter. Again, there might be additional worries there that we learn about in the future, but for right now, I think it's just important to understand that in any social media, you are giving up a lot of information about yourself, and you should do that thoughtfully and with a purpose, and you should have a plan when doing it. You shouldn't do it randomly. And so that's just my recommendation to business owners and people who use this personally who are business people, or people who use this personally who are just family people. You know, this is a potential problem if you don't think about how you want to divulge this information on yourself. So that's what I have to say.
That that will go in the 2 minutes or less category, but it was still well
It was probably over
summarized.
30 seconds. Yeah.